Welcome back to the Real Life Theology Podcast. This is your host, Matthew Croson. Today we have a special episode with you, an interview between Daniel McCoy and David Upchurch about Renew.org's newest book, The Disciple Making Grandparent. If you are a grandparent out there and you are interested in knowing how to disciple your grandkids, this is the book for you. Check out the book in the description and enjoy this preview episode.
Well, hey, my name is Daniel McCoy. I'm editorial director for Renew.org. I'm here with David Upchurch, who is a church relations guy at Ozark Christian College and an all-around great guy. And David and I have written a book called The Disciple Making Grandparent, and we're super excited about this book. And David, you've given trainings in churches on how to be a disciple-making force in your grandkids' lives. Why is that topic of being a disciple-making grandparent, why is that important to you?
Well, there are two scriptures that have really meant a lot to me. That one is kind of a scary one. The other one is an encouraging one. Back when Joshua gave his final address and said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," and all the people said, "Hey, we're with you. We're going to do that too." And then you flip a few pages, and I think it's in Judges 2, where we read, "After that generation passed away, another generation grew up that did not know God or what he had done for Israel." And that, when I was a dad, that was something that I don't want that to be said of my kids. You know, I want them to know God and what he's done and who he is and how important a relationship with him is. And when grandkids came along, that's my desire for them. And that, for all of us, life gets busy. And you don't want to make the most important thing somehow get slid to the back burner. So that one. Then the other one is in 3 John, I think it's verse 4, that I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. And I want my grandkids. They're going to grow up, and at some point I won't be here, but I want to know that they are always walking in the truth. They're always walking with Jesus. And I want that for others as well. So those two verses really have kind of shaped why this is important to me.
And writing this book with you, I can tell you loved being a dad. You love that, but you love being a grandpa. Can you describe just kind of the what that is like for you to be a grandfather of 6, right?
Right. Oh, and I mean, being a dad was great, but there's a lot of pressure when you're a mom or a dad. You feel like I've got to get this right. And there's so many things that at the time seem like on a scale of 1 to 10, they're a 10, and they're really not. They're a 3 or 4. And you kind of miss out on some of the fun that you could have had if you would have just recognized that at the time. And so now the grandkids come along. The things that used to bother me, or maybe I get a little angry with my kids, I think it's funny with my grandkids. It's a whole different ball game. And so I say kids are great, but grandkids that's like kids on steroids. Just so much more fun. And there's not the pressure that the parents have.
And you personally didn't have grandfathers in your life growing up. What do you love getting to do for your grandkids that it would have been nice for you growing up?
Yeah, and when I was growing up, I didn't know. I had my grandmas, and we only saw each other a couple of times a year. One lived probably 3 hours away. One was probably 6 hours, 7 hours away. And we didn't get to see each other very often. And I love my grandmas, but there wasn't that close relationship. I didn't have a grandpa, and so I didn't know what I was missing. But I kind of knew that there was a hole there. And I had friends who had grandparents, and they'd talk about, what they were doing with their grandparents. And I didn't have that. So I look back now, and I mean, my dad was great. But it would have been nice to have someone who had a little bit lighter view of things, because my dad, he was kind of like me. Everything's heavy, and there was a discipline. It would have been nice to have someone who my dad could pat me on the rear, and maybe a grandpa who could pat me a little higher up on the back a little bit, and uh, and enjoy life with that person.
Uh, what are some of the unique advantages that grandparents can have when it comes to helping their grandkids make it through and have a relationship with Jesus? What are some of the unique advantages there that the grandparents can take advantage of?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what I just said. I think kids will look at their parents, and the parents, they're teaching, they're loving, they're nurturing, but they're also disciplining. And there's maybe a love fear combination with kids and their parents. And I think maybe with grandparents being a little bit lighter, they're not quite as walking on eggshells, maybe a little bit more open. And at some point, I think kids are going to rebel against what their mom and dad say. They're going to test the waters, and the grandparents have a different relationship. And so I think an advantage is we don't have to be that heavy. We can be the one there who just loving them and hugging them and encouraging them, and they'll probably take what we say at face value more than what their parents might say. I think that's an advantage. A disadvantage, maybe time, that we don't have as much time. And then I think there's a temptation as a grandparent when we get our grandkids, we want them to have a blast. We want to have fun with them. We want them to enjoy coming to our house. And we might focus on that more than, hey, let me talk to you about God. Let me tell you about my faith. Again, we can put the most important thing on the back burner because we want to have fun. We want to have experiences, and we need to do both.
Yeah. Yeah. In the book, we talk about how grandparents have both more time and less time. As in the way we package those is those are both advantages because the more time is they tend to have a little bit more free schedule, a little bit more time to breathe. They're not making their career happen. They're not needing to pay for the braces and all that kind of stuff that it takes there's a lot of stress involved, and there's a little bit more time when you're at grandma and grandpa's, and you can kind of take it a little more easily, but there's also at the same time there's less time in terms of less time to go, less time before the end, and it's easier, I think, at least it can be easier to prioritize the time and to say I really do want to leave a legacy. And so more time, less time. We also talk about less coolness, and not in your case, I know, but a lot of grandparents, maybe a little bit not as up on the fashion and the coolness, and I think that is actually a really good thing for grandkids. The grandkids can be around somebody that they don't feel like they have to keep up with the fashion, the coolness, the latest, whatever lingo. It's like these people are who they are, and I can feel comfortable around them. I think that's a beautiful thing.
I think so. But when I look at the time that we do have, whenever I'm telling my grandkids goodbye, almost every time I'll say, hey, before you leave, I got to tell you something. And I don't think I've ever told you this before. And they just start shaking their head like, Papa, you tell us all the time. They already know, and I love you. But I try to, say it in different ways, but I don't think I've ever told you this before. And they know I tell them every time. But it makes me think, what else do I want them to know? What else do I want them to remember? And if they make a top 3 list, well, my papa tells me he loves me, he has cookies, and he's always has ice cream and makes me milkshakes. All those are good things, but I want there to be more than that too. I want them to know that God is very important to me, that Jesus, I love him with all my heart, and that Jesus loves them. And I need to do a better job at communicating those kind of things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those those seasons that they have of anxiety and of stress, I think the older generation, they've seen it all. And so they can really be that calm, steady voice of it's going to be okay, and take the next step and say, hey, God has shown himself to be faithful in my life, and he's going to show himself to be faithful in yours as well. So yeah, definitely some advantages there, but we do need to be intentional about taking those opportunities. Let's talk about some disadvantages in terms of what makes it harder. And you mentioned, we can want, one of the disadvantages is we can want things to always be fun with the grandkids, and I get that. You don't want to potentially burn any bridges by coming across too dogmatic about anything. But what are some other disadvantages that can make that relationship hard if you're trying to build that bridge to be able to kind of help them to trust and follow Jesus?
Well, I think there is a connection being a parent and a grandparent, in that I was a preacher as my kids were growing up. My wife was a school teacher. They lived in the bubble wherever they went, because everyone knew that their mom was a teacher. So at school, there was this expectation of them, and then everyone knew that their dad was a preacher, and there was an expectation. And so at home, there were times I probably backed away from that, wanting them to have more of a normal life like all the other kids. And they didn't feel like, I go to church, I go to Sunday school, I go to youth groups, and I come home and I get the same thing at home that I got at church. I wanted them to have like I said, more normal life like their friends had. But one of the dangers is backing away too far. And I think with the grandkids, the same thing can happen. That I'm not preaching at one church, but I'm on staff at Ozark Christian College. I speak almost every weekend someplace. They know what I do, and I don't want them to feel like, when they come to our house, it's going to be Sunday school hour. Mm-hmm. And so I might back away a little bit too much, and I want to be more intentional. I try to do that, but I want to be more intentional, that I don't want them to just have a good time. I want them to have some time with God when they're with us, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. There's also a chapter on, already having done your time, and how there are some grandparents that really feel like, hey, I've already put in my time with my kids, and maybe it was hard, and not really that excited about trying to put myself out there for the grandkids as well, any more than I'm obligated to. Could you speak into that a little bit? How do you help grandparents avoid that way of thinking, of just saying, look, I've already put in my time. I think I deserve to not have to put myself out there in this way.
Well, I view that as, I put in my time with my kids, which was basically learning what to do and what not to do. And, now I get to perfect that a little bit more. Now I learned with my kids, and I made a lot of mistakes as I was learning that. Now I've got it down pat a little bit more. I should know more about what to do than when I was doing the on-the-job training as a parent. Mm-hmm. And I don't get I've done my time as a grandparent. At the same time, we've never had the experience some grandparents have, where they basically have the grandkids all the time because the parents aren't there. I could understand where that could be a little bit restrictive, but I still think that if that happened, they're my grandkids. I would want to spend as much time with them as I can. And if I have to choose between hanging out with my grandkids or playing golf, I want my grandkids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They bring so much joy and life into otherwise a stagnant life. I just think kids are amazing, and they shake things up in the best way. So Is there a particular chapter in the book, The Disciple Making Grandparent, that you found a lot of fun to put together? Maybe it's an especially helpful chapter that if someone could only read one of the chapters in the book, this would be the one that you'd point them to. Is there any particular chapter that was especially important?
Well, my first thoughts there would be, well, anything that you wrote, would be the most important. And where I come down really is on that. It's not a chapter. It's the postlude or whatever, that very end where you do the funeral message for a spiritual grandmother. It's not a real teaching. It's not hero principles, and it doesn't address things that are addressed in the chapters. But I think it's so important for grandparents to realize, hey, there's a day we're not going to be here. And what do we want our grandkids to remember? What do we want our grandkids to say about us? What are the values that get passed down, and what will they recognize those values as being? To me, that was a great way to end the book, because all of us are, we're not going to be here someday. And we want to live on through our kids. We want to live on through our grandkids. And so I think for that reason, what you shared at the end is very important, because we need to be living now in such a way that our grandkids are going to have those great memories when we're gone.
Mm. In the kind of the core of the book, we have 4 main chapters. The first one being how to connect with your grandchild. The second one being the first one, how to make room for your grandchild. And second, how to connect with your grandchild. Third, how to give what counts to your grandchild. And then fourthly, how to speak truth to your grandchild. And those chapters were just a lot of fun to put together, because they're all centered around these interviews that we did with different people who are just doing a great job at it. John and Louise Whitaker, Terry and Carol Stein, Ken and Kayleen Eidelman, Bob and Judy Russell. Just really rich conversations that got to make it into this book and give us all kind of pictures of what it could look like to be a disciple-making grandparent. Let's take each of those 4 steps and just briefly kind of give the people listening now, just give them a little bit of hey, this is maybe a thought or two that would be helpful in this area. So that first area, again, is making room for your grandchild. And that conversation with John and Louise Whitaker was fascinating, because they were in the process of moving to building a new house in order to literally make room for their grandkids. And so in your life, what does that look like to maybe metaphorically or physically just kind of carve out some space for the grandkids? And again, this is just to give the people listening maybe some pictures, some thoughts, some insights on what that might look like in their life.
Yeah, we had downsized. We had a bigger house, and all the kids were gone, so we downsized, and we bought a duplex that was just being built, so it was brand new. We'd never had a brand new house before, and we loved it. But the yard was tiny, and when all 6 grandkids were there, there wasn't anything to do. I remember one time they were there, and I made a sign out of cardboard, and they stood out in the yard by the road and held it up, and it said honk. And if a car honked, they thought that was great. Well, that was one time. Every time they come to Mimi and Papaw's house, they're not going to want to do that. And so we started looking for something a little bit bigger, and we found 10 acres out in the country, and we've got a little farm, and the grandkids love coming to the farm, and we've got a garden, and I've got a friend that runs cows on me, and they love coming and having those experiences. And so in a physical way, we want to make time and space. Got a 4-wheeler, got a go-kart, we want them to come and have fun. So that's one thing we've done physically, but the other thing is just to make sure we clear our calendars. And there's the old saying, how do you spell love? And it's Time, that we need to carve out time. And I think I mentioned this in the book, but our oldest grandson, a couple of summers ago, he came to stay all night with us, and he didn't know what we were going to do, but we hopped on the Amtrak and went to St. Louis, spent the day, and came back, and he just loved his first train ride. He could tell you everything about that day. I went up in the arch, just had a blast. And so we're wanting to carve out time with each of our grandkids one-on-one, because when all six are together, or when the four siblings and two siblings are together, there's that competition for attention. And we want to start having some times where just one-on-one, they have all of us.
Yeah, that's good. Connecting with your grandchild. And as you speak into this, how has that needed to change as the grandkids have gotten older? Connecting with them might look one way when they're 5, 6, and then as they get into their teen years, it probably takes a lot more intentionality to really connect with them. So what are just maybe a couple ways that you have connected with them, and how has that kind of changed over the years?
Well, each one has their own personality and things that they appreciate. And our oldest, Caden, is 13, and he probably is the most sentimental grandchild that we have. And so when he turned 13, his mom and dad gave me permission, but I gave them one of my old pocket knives. And I gave instructions what to do, what not to do. But I said, I didn't buy you a new one. I've had this one for a long, long time. And for him, having one that had belonged to me was more important than if I would have bought him one. And so I've discovered things that if I can give him something that has sentimental value. Tomorrow night, he is going to play his guitar for the very first time at a talent show at his school. And I've got to go to the area to work a conference this weekend. And so I'm going to leave early, and I'm going to show up to see him play his guitar.
Mm.
Most of my grandkids have played soccer, basketball, baseball, just getting over their games and being a part of their game. We're taking them out and playing catch with them or kicking the soccer ball. Again, it comes down to time, but knowing that what I did when they were 3 isn't going to work when they're 8.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to find out what they enjoy. And sometimes they like things that I'm not that crazy about, but I need to learn about it and do it with them anyway.
Oh, that's good. Then the next one, how to give what counts to your grandkids. And what are some of the things in the book you talk about that we really need to give these to our grandkids? And if we don't give these things, then we're missing some really important opportunities.
Well, I think, there are several things, but the most important would be our faith, and just how important our faith is, and to let them know. We have a 10-year-old grandson that just got baptized a few weeks ago, and we couldn't be there. We were out of state, and we missed that. But then the next weekend when we got home, we made sure we were able to get over and see him and talk about how important that was, how proud we were of him, and just to celebrate that with him. And I think pass on our faith, passing on our love for our family. And I think that there are so many kids and grandkids that don't hear those words, I love you, or I'm proud of you. But just to make sure that we're always letting them know how much we love them, that we are proud of them, that they can turn to us anytime. The importance of faith and family. I think those are 2 very important areas that we need to pour into.
Yeah. And that fourth kind of core chapter talking about how to speak truth to your grandkid. We spent some time in the book describing the world that they're growing up in and some of the lies that are really challenging their faith and inviting them to walk away from Jesus. And we talk about, in the opening chapter, we talk about in the book of Daniel, where you have the king Belshazzar, and he is throwing this party, and he's got all sorts of friends there. He's got all the money he could ever want. He's got his, whole whole army of astrologers and wise people who can tell him what he wants to hear. But when there's that writing on the wall, it's clear he's not got what he needs, and he's panicking. And what ends up happening is they send for, first, there's this old lady, the Queen Mother. She's the calm voice in the room. She says, "Hey, let's just go talk to the," and then brings in another old guy, Daniel, who had been in the kingdom for a long time. And what Belshazzar needed was the steady, calm voice of old people who had seen it all and could kind of speak that truth. And so I think that that's what grandparents can be in a very anxious world, in a very stressed out world. I think grandparents can be that calm, steady voice of wisdom that you can't buy it. You can't. These are the truly valuable voices in their life. So, did you want to say anything on kind of how, maybe a couple ways people can speak truth into their grandkids' lives?
I think one of the things when you share about your own life and life lessons that you've learned, don't be afraid to tell about times that you made a mistake and what you learned from that. There's no saying that God never wastes an experience. And so by, telling our grandkids, "Hey, I faced that too. I did something and I made a mistake. And here's why I learned from that. And here's why I don't want you to go down that road. You don't have to make the same mistakes I made." Because so often I think kids feel like they're being told what to do and what not to do, but not why. Or we can come across as, well, we're the perfect ones telling you need to be more perfect. But if they can see that we encounter some of the same things they're encountering and how we came through that, I think it's important. That's a part of being a good example. Sometimes being a good example is sharing times that you were not a good example and how you wish you would have done things different. I think that makes them more open to us speaking the truth to them than if we're coming across more like a Pharisaical type of attitude.
Yeah, that's good. David, you and I are passionate about grandparents staying in the game or getting back in the game and realizing, man, there is so much that you can do for that generation, that we don't want that to be a lost generation. We want that generation to trust and follow Jesus and to find life amid all the anxiety. And so we're really grateful for this book that we're able to put out there. And if people listening, if any of them want you to come to their church and maybe do some training on how to be a disciple-making grandparent, as you've done this at some churches before, how do they contact you? How do they reach out?
Well, I work for Ozark Christian College, and my email would probably be the best way to get in touch with me. And that is my last name and then my first name, upchurch.david@occ.edu. upchurch.david@occ.edu.
All right. Thanks, David. Good hanging out.
Hey, always good to talk to you, Daniel. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. If you're interested in getting the book, A Disciple Making Grandparent, check out the link in the description to preview that book. We resume back with our 2024 Gathering Track sessions next week, diving into Resisting Christian Nationalism with Paul Hugo Bart. See you then.